Chapter 1. The Scent of Treason. The scent of burnt wood and fear hung heavy in the War Citadel strategy room, but Drakkar barely noticed. That scent was the wallpaper of his world. More importantly, the scent of treason, sharp and metallic, was much harder to ignore. Drakkar stood before the obsidian table, his large frame blocking the weak morning light. His obsidian throne, cold and imposing, seemed to watch the scene. A man, Beta, once trusted advisor, now enemy, knelt on the cold stone floor. Blood pulsed beneath the Beta's jugular, so fast it made Drakkar's own alpha heart thump once, hard in annoyance. "You communicated with the border towns?" Drakkar stated. His voice wasn't a shout, it was a low, rumbling growl that promised slow agony. "You tried to use the Omegas as leverage." The Beta, Elric, wept, but it wasn't the sound of true remorse. It was the frantic, slick plea of a coward. "My king, I swear on the wolf god's honor." "Honor is ash," Drakkar cut him off. Instead, he leaned close enough for his breath to stir the scent of fear surrounding the Beta. "You mistook my patience for weakness. Truth be told, that is the worst kind of mistake because weakness is what kills kings." This wasn't just about Elric. Not only that, this was about the past. About the woman who had shared his bed and almost slit his throat, believing his lust had made him soft. That betrayal had carved a deep scar onto his soul, making him equate all emotional intimacy with a potential knife in the dark. That's why he ruled with iron. Drakkar gave a subtle nod to the chief guard, Kale. Without warning, Kale's massive hand clamped down on Elric's neck. There was a sickening crack. A beat later, the stench of fear was violently replaced by the thick, sweet tang of death. Drakkar didn't flinch. Still, the execution offered no release. It only sharpened his hunger for absolute security. On the other hand, he was annoyed. Annoyed because the recent tributes, the Omegas sent from the conquered lands, had been pathetic. They cried too loud, broke too fast, and smelled only of transient terror, not the profound, absolute fear that would signify true, permanent psychological surrender. "Kale," Drakkar commanded, turning back to the table, ignoring the fresh stain on the floor. "The next Omega. I want one that isn't broken before she arrives. Find me an unbroken Omega, a prize that means something." His golden eyes, heavy with predatory intensity, settled on Kale. "I want one who will shatter only for me. Send someone to the former Serina territory. Look closer this time." The tension broke with that command. Drakkar knew he needed something new, something real to anchor his chaotic world. What's worse, he was starting to feel that itch of suspicion about Kale too. Maybe it was his curse, always waiting for the next knife. Chapter 2. The Portrait of a Ghost. Drakkar's private quarters were a statement of wealth and chilling power. Black marble, dark furs, and silence that absorbed all sound. Meanwhile, the chamber felt less like a home and more like a tomb dedicated to his paranoia. He walked past the huge fireplace, the fire doing little to ward off the emotional cold. He stopped before a hidden niche in the wall. Inside was not a trophy of war, but a smooth piece of obsidian, a cold, black mirror. Before he could move, he traced the edge of the stone. This obsidian wasn't just a decoration. It was a piece of the wall from the chamber where his former mate, Lyra, had nearly killed him. Lyra, who had perfected the art of softness. Her touch had been gentle, her gaze adoring. As a result, Drakkar had lowered his defenses, believing her to be the one truly submissive Omega he craved. Deep down he knew the truth. Her submission had been a calculated performance, a poisonous velvet glove. "All submission is deceit," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "Why do Omegas always lie?" He remembered her smile, a devastatingly sweet smile, just before the silver dagger was aimed at his heart. Because of that memory he would never trust tears, pleas, or false affection again. He believed all weakness was a potential weapon. In fact, that failed assassination attempt was the true founding stone of his kingdom's brutal policy toward Omegas. Not only that, it was the wellspring of his constant internal question. Is this possession real, or is she just another lie I haven't broken yet? Just like that, the door latch clicked. Drakkar's hand went to the large, scarred knife strapped to his thigh. "Who dares intrude?" It was a lower-ranking guard, nervous, fidgeting, and smelling of nervous sweat and stale wood. "My king, apologies. But the patrol returned from the border. They brought something unusual." "Unusual how?" Draker's golden eyes narrowed, their glow intensifying in the dim room. "She fits the king's request, my lord. She's from the occupied lands, no clear papers, no memory it seems. And she's too quiet. No tears, no defiance, just a look of shattered glass." The guard swallowed hard. With every heartbeat, the guard's nervousness increased, which strangely calmed Draker. "A look of shattered glass," Draker repeated, the phrase catching his primal instinct like bait. "No weeping? No begging?" Maybe it was fate, but this description was different. This wasn't the expected histrionics. This Omega wasn't merely broken, she sounded empty. As the wind shifted outside, Draker felt a strange pull. An Omega who was too silent, too devoid of emotion, sounded like a perfect, blank slate or a perfect trap. He needed to know which. Without another word, he moved past the guard, his cloak swirling behind him, ready to confirm this new prey. Chapter 3: The Pure Scent of Fear. The holding cell was cold and sparsely furnished, smelling of must and stale fear from previous occupants. But then Draker stepped across the threshold and the scent changed instantly. It was a clear, unadulterated plume of pure, raw terror. It didn't smell manufactured or hysterical. It smelled like the primal, visceral fear of a hunted deer. It was intoxicating. Serena, the Omega, stood near the back wall. She was small, pale, and delicate, a visual contradiction to the fierce, cold energy Draker felt radiating from her. Her clothes were simple, torn, and still smelled faintly of the ash and damp earth of the ruined estate where she had staged her discovery. Draker walked toward her slowly, his boots thudding softly on the stone. As the silence stretched, Serena's body began to tremble. It was a deep, full-body tremor, not a superficial shake. Her eyes, wide and bruised with exhaustion, were fixed on his chest, refusing to meet his face, the ultimate sign of submission. "Tell me your name, little Omega," Draker commanded, his voice deliberately low and hypnotic, layered with the alpha authority that could crush an Omega's will. Serena didn't speak. She just stood frozen. Instead, the scent of her fear intensified, smelling like burnt sugar and raw grief. "She won't speak, my king," Captain Kale, who stood ready, reported. "She hasn't uttered a single word since capture. She's a ghost." Draker ignored Kale, circling Serena like a predatory cat examining his prey. With his scent in the air, the Omega's breathing became shallow, hitching in her chest. This is it, he thought. This is the real thing. He had never encountered such perfect, controlled, absolute surrender. Every other Omega he claimed had tried to fight, bargain, or feign affection. Serena simply existed as a vessel of terror. "Look at her, Kale," Draker growled softly, turning to his guard. "No defiance. No false love. Only terror." Which meant she understands her place, because she knows true power when she smells it. Yet there was a strange, diamond-hard quality to her stillness. He couldn't shake the feeling that beneath the terror, there was something tightly coiled. He needed to test the limits of this possession. He reached out a single finger and gently tilted her chin up, forcing her to look at him. The moment their eyes locked, Serena didn't flinch away, but her eyes glazed over, a purely dissociative, traumatic response. "She is perfect." Draker smiled, a chilling, predatory curve of his lips. "You will be my favorite prize, little Omega. You will prove that my paranoia is justified, because only absolute submission is honest." So, his question began to shift from "is she a lie?" "How deeply can I own this truth?" "Prepare her," Draker told Kale, pulling his hand away. "Send her to my private chambers. Now. The journey begins." That night, the game of ash and vengeance would truly commence. Chapter 4: The Arrival. The cold metal of the war citadel always felt like an extension of Draker's own spine, but the air in his private chamber was suddenly too thick, too warm. Draker paced, waiting. With every heartbeat, he inhaled the building scent of Serena's approach. Fear, yes, but layered with a faint, smoky residue, the ash of her old life. He was ready to claim his prize. He was tense. Is this possession real, or is she just another lie I haven't broken yet? The great oak doors creaked open. Just like that, two armored guards too gently, Dracker thought with a frown, escorted her in. Serena was a living contradiction. She was small, delicate, wearing only a coarse linen shift the guards had given her. In that moment her exposed skin was goose flesh, not from the room's chill but from profound terror. Her head was bowed, her entire posture a sculpture of absolute surrender. After that, the guards left and the thick doors sealed her in with him. Dracker's primal instinct took over. He wasn't seeing a human. He was seeing the ultimate, unbroken prize. Not only that, her scent of terror hit him like a physical blow. It was exactly as described. Deep, raw, and pure, lacking the acid edge of defiance he'd come to expect from the betrayed. He moved toward her, slowly, deliberately. As the air thickened, Serena made no sound, no sudden move. She's not even looking for an escape, he noted. Her small hands were clasped in front of her, trembling. Despite that, there was an unnatural stillness to her core, like a stone in a fast river. Maybe it was fate, but she was utterly perfect for his twisted fantasy. "Raise your head, Omega," he commanded. His voice was laced with alpha authority, designed to demand compliance. She obeyed, the movement slow, agonizingly hesitant. Her eyes, the color of stormy gray, rose only to his chin before quickly darting away, refusing the direct challenge of his gaze. Before the words left her lips, she let out a tiny, choked whimper. It wasn't loud enough to be a plea, it was a noise of sheer, overwhelming psychic pain. "Good," Dracker murmured. He reached out and let his scarred thumb graze the delicate curve of her jaw. The skin beneath his touch was ice cold. What followed was a silence that roared. He was convinced this was not a performance because her terror felt too complete, too consuming to be feigned. He saw the tiny flinch when his skin touched hers. With a single glance, he committed the memory of that flinch to his mind. "This is mine," he thought, a dark, possessive swell rising in his chest. So the game officially began. He had his prize. Chapter 5. The Line of Possession. Dracker stood over Serena. His shadow completely consumed her small form, a visual metaphor he appreciated. As the shadow darkened, he allowed his own scent, rich, powerful alpha dominance and cold, metallic authority, to flood the room, intentionally overwhelming her senses. "You know why you are here," Dracker stated, his words heavy and slow. After that, he watched her closely, anticipating any hidden resistance. But then she only shook her head once, tiny and pathetic. "No, my king," she whispered, her voice barely a breathy rasp, fitting the picture of a psychologically broken Omega. He knelt, bringing his eyes level with hers, a deliberate act of lowering himself that felt dangerous but thrilling. "You are here because you are a spoil of war. You are here because I conquered your land and slaughtered those who protected you. That's why you will belong to me, body and spirit." He took one of her trembling hands. It felt like holding a bird that expected to be crushed. In fact, he felt a surge of cold satisfaction. "I intend to fit my every inch into your vulnerable body," he declared, his voice a possessive murmur, marking the true beginning of their deadly intimacy. "You are the prize that will prove I can possess absolutely." He waited for the scream, the tears, the frantic resistance that always came. Instead, nothing. She didn't struggle, she simply shut down. Her eyes fluttered, but she didn't break contact, enduring the pain of his words. This complete lack of fighting, this perfect, controlled shutdown, thrilled Dracker more than any loud conquest. The ultimate submission. Because of that, he truly believed he had the real thing, the one Omega who wasn't lying. He stood, pulling her up with him. Even so, his paranoia still nagged at him. He needed more than submission. He needed to eliminate the possibility of deceit. Without thinking, a new idea formed. "You will not be broken by pain, little Omega," Dracker declared, running the back of his hand along the cold skin of her neck. "You will be broken by my ownership. By my protection." He released her, the brief moment of contact leaving a strange, heated tension in the air. The tension broke with his next command. "I will not put you in a cage," he told her. I will make the world your cage and I will be the key. Chapter 6. The Visible Trophy. A strange, possessive feeling settled over Drakkar, one he hadn't experienced since his alpha instincts fully matured. As the bond pulsed, a bond forged in sheer dominance, not affection, he realized he couldn't simply use Serena and discard her. He needed her constantly nearby. Drakkar summoned his stewards. Soon after, he dictated new orders. Serena was to be given the grandest suite near his own, bathed in oils, clothed in silks and given guards, not to keep her in but to keep others out. To make things worse, her presence was to be an open secret, a visible trophy. No harm is to come to her, he told the chief steward, Kale, his voice hard. She is mine. Any glance, any touch, any attempt to speak to her without my permission will be considered an act of treason against the throne. This Omega will not be a shadow. That night, Drakkar couldn't sleep. He felt a burning need to know where she was, to smell her fierce scent anchoring him to his own power. He paced the connecting hallway. When her name left his lips in a near whisper, Serena, it felt dangerously intimate. What followed was a new strategy, a total shift. He would break her by overwhelming her with his possessive protection. As if pulled by a string, he found himself by the door to her suite. He pressed his ear to the cold wood. He couldn't hear crying, only the rhythmic, shallow breathing of someone barely sleeping. Her fierce scent, still strong, acted like a perverse incense, soothing his paranoia. She is genuinely terrified of me. Good. Because of that, he could trust her presence. Drakkar knew this was dangerous. Yet he dismissed the thought. He would use her submission to anchor his soul. This Omega will be my proof, he thought, touching the cold wood of the door. My proof that I can secure true, total, absolute possession. Which meant he was now committed to keeping her alive, protecting her, and spending the necessary time to fully understand his new chilling prize. He would not kill her quickly. He would keep her close. That's why his obsession was now locked into motion, and the true cost of Serena's vengeance was about to be paid. Chapter 7. The Trophy on Display. The king's court was a den of vipers, all polished teeth and poisonous whispers. Come morning, Drakkar decided to parade his prize. That's why he ordered Serena dressed in the silkiest black gowns, clothing her in his territory's colors. He wanted every jealous beta and ambitious alpha in his citadel to know exactly who she belonged to. He led her into the grand hall. The smell of rich food, perfume and political ambition hit them first. As the air thickened, the hall fell into a stunned silence. Every eye, every golden eye of the shifters, every sly eye of the human courtiers, snapped to Serena. She walked beside Drakkar, close enough that her arm brushed his gauntlet, but she was a study in pure, weaponized fragility. Her head was held high enough to project the king's pride, but then her eyes remained downcast, fixed on the mosaic floor. Not only that, her fierce scent, usually a raw plume, was muted here, a tight, suppressed flicker that only Drakkar, keyed into her, could detect. She is controlling it, he realized, a dark flicker of admiration mixed with suspicion. He pulled her closer, his hand settling heavy on the curve of her waist, a purely territorial gesture. With a single glance, he saw the envy in the eyes of his second-in-command, Thane. Thane, who often challenged Drakkar's brutality, saw Serena as a potential weakness, a beautiful target. Drakkar spoke to his court, his voice booming. Behold the new prize of the kingdom. She is under my direct protection. Any trespass is an act of treason. What followed was a series of forced courtesies. Serena endured the stares, the whispers, and the calculated attempts by minor nobles to catch her eye. She didn't know what scared her more, the crowd's predatory hunger or Drakkar's cold, heavy presence beside her. Yet, as Drakkar watched her shrink, appearing to tremble subtly when Thane approached, his possessiveness swelled. She is mine to protect. He saw the courtiers exchanging sly glances. Because of that display, they believed they had found a flaw in his armor. Fools. They didn't understand that her fragility was now his strength. He would obliterate anyone who dared try to use her. Drakkar gave Thane a look that promised a slow, painful death if he looked at Serena again. Before either could speak, Drakkar steered Serena away, the scent of his protection, cold, dominant alpha, firmly cloaking her. He needed to keep her closer. He needed to ensure her submission remained absolute and untested by outsiders. Chapter 8, The Quiet Watch. Dracker stood in his private surveillance office, a small room tucked behind a false bookcase. Meanwhile, his gaze was fixed on the single flawless sheet of mirrored glass that overlooked Serina's opulent suite. This was his sanctuary, a place where his paranoia could be fed or soothed. Serina was alone. At the same time, she believed she was completely unobserved. She was sitting by the large, ornate window, the moonlight casting her face in stark silver and shadow. Instead of weeping, wailing, or pacing, the typical post-conquest routine, she was utterly still. Dracker leaned closer, his brow furrowed. As the silence roared in the observation room, he noted her breathing. Deep, controlled, almost meditative. Where is the fear set? It was present, but strangely muted, like a banked fire. With every heartbeat, he watched her closely. She wasn't gazing at the moon. Her eyes were tracking the movement of the guards on the patrol path outside. Not only that, she subtly tested the window latch, a movement so slight it was almost invisible. An instinctual prisoner checking her bars, Dracker dismissed. Because of that careful assessment, he felt a strange, detached calm. This wasn't resistance. This was simple survival. She was adapting. After that, she pulled her small frame back to the center of the room and simply sat, staring blankly ahead. Still, the sheer emptiness of her demeanor captivated him. No sadness. No rage. Only absence. This total psychological surrender was more compelling than any forced tears. She is finally and truly broken, he concluded, his primal instincts satisfied. As a result, his guard lowered a fraction. He felt an unusual sense of peace. In fact, watching her stillness was more soothing than the execution of his traitorous beta. This Omega, through her perfect submission, was becoming his strange, silent anchor. He decided to reward her perceived obedience. So he turned from the mirrored glass. Without another word, he summoned Kale. He didn't send flowers or jewelry, those were for lovers. He sent a gift for a prized possession, a rare, heavy map of the northern borderlands, a map he valued himself. It was a clear, silent message: I provide. You are valuable to me. Chapter 9, The First Test of Possession. The political crisis hit like a sudden storm. A critical outpost had been attacked, drawing Dracker's full, furious attention to the War Council. Meanwhile, Serina was left relatively unguarded in the King's Wing, the guard's attention momentarily fragmented by the chaos. Dracker was mid-strategy when Thane, the ambitious beta, entered the room and, with calculated insolence, excused himself. Dracker's stomach clenched. As the bond pulsed with an immediate, furious warning, he knew exactly where Thane was going. Thane was going to test his prize. Dracker ignored the ongoing council debate, his mind instantly refocusing on his possession. In the span of a breath, the scent of Serina's fear, usually a low hum, spiked sharply, a clear, frantic signal. The spike was controlled, not hysterical. She did that deliberately, Dracker realized, a terrifying admiration and rage flooding him. He burst out of the council room. Without warning, he slammed open the door to Serina's suite. Thane stood there, too close to Serina, his hand hovering over her arm, his beta pheromones attempting to assert minor dominance. Before she could move, Dracker was across the room. Get out. Dracker's voice was a low, seismic rumble. It wasn't an order, it was a pure alpha threat that vibrated through the stone floor. Thane froze, turning pale. My king, I merely offered the Omega. You offered what is mine, Dracker snarled, his eyes flashing molten gold. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the Alpha's immediate reaction. He shoved Thane away with a force that sent the Beta sprawling into a marble table. Which meant Thane was lucky to live. Dracker didn't look at Thane again. Instead, he focused only on Serina. She was shaking again, her eyes wide, but her fear scent was already receding back to that tightly controlled flicker. She is using her terror as a weapon for protection, he acknowledged. More importantly, she sought his defense. He gripped her arm, not gently, and pulled her close, inhaling her scent, The fear, the ash, the clean scent of his silk. That's why he felt the intensity of his protection instinct. A wild, possessive rage that surprised even him. Why does the thought of anyone else touching my possession infuriate me so much? He hauled her toward his private chambers. At that moment he knew the citadel wasn't safe enough. He needed to keep her within arm's reach. Just like that, the cage closed completely around them both, setting the stage for the true. Chapter 10, The Unexpected Insight. The close call with Thane had locked Serena into Draker's direct custody. As a result, she was now always within his sight, often sitting silently behind a screen in his strategy room while he met with his inner circle. That night, the room smelled of burnt oil, sweat, and the sharp ink of war maps. Draker was discussing a complex siege plan for the rebellious Western territories. General Valerius was advocating a frontal assault, demanding fresh troops be pulled from the northern supply routes. But then, Drake noticed Serena's reflection in the obsidian tabletop. Her stillness was shattered by a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. A sudden, sharp tightening of her hands, a quick intake of breath, not of fear but of realization. It happened precisely when Valerius mentioned the Serpent's Pass supply route. Later, alone in his chambers, Draker cornered her. Without warning, he grabbed her chin, his eyes burning with focused suspicion. "The Serpent's Pass," he ground out. "What did you recognize?" Serena trembled, her eyes still glazed with that obedient fear. Instead of crumbling, she used fear to mask her intelligence. "My king, I heard stories from the borderlands. They said the pass is treacherous in the spring thaw. The ground shifts. They use it only for light scouts." Her voice was a terrified, breathless whisper, yet the information was devastatingly strategic. Draker felt a jolt run through him, a mix of shock and exhilarating vindication. In fact, Valerius's plan would have been a massacre. Not only that, the insight was sound, brilliant even. This Omega is intelligent, he realized, a dangerous admiration beginning to override his skepticism. Because of that sheer brilliance, he couldn't kill her. He had to possess that mind too. "You speak the truth," Draker said, slowly releasing her jaw. What followed was a silence heavy with shifting power. "You use your mind to survive. Good." He misinterpreted her fear-driven survival instinct as loyalty. "Her terror is so absolute that she now serves my survival," he thought, twisting her action into proof of her utter dependence. So, Draker pulled a stool close to the screen she hid behind. He needed her strategic mind. He needed her silence. He needed this new, intelligent part of his possession. This Omega was proving to be more than a trophy. She was becoming a dangerous, indispensable tool. Chapter 11, The Possessive Anchor. The assassination attempt was sloppy, desperate, and delivered in the black of night as Draker returned from a late inspection. Meanwhile, the attacker was a low-ranking beta seeking glory, hidden in the citadel's upper rafters. The beta lunged, aiming a short, poisoned blade. Draker easily dispatched the beta with a brutal efficiency born of constant vigilance. But then, the beta's falling body knocked over a heavy candelabra. It flew toward Draker's side, a minor, non-lethal threat, but one that could have broken his rhythm. Serena was being escorted 10 feet behind him. As if pulled by a string, she moved. Without thinking, she let out a sharp, piercing human shriek, not a scream of fear but a sudden high sound designed to distract. Not only that, she stumbled, falling right in the path of the falling candelabra, which clattered harmlessly against her shoulder instead of hitting Draker. Draker finished the kill, the beta's blood spraying the stone. Just like that, he turned, adrenaline surging, to see Serena huddled on the floor, weeping now in genuine shock, her body shuddering. Blinding shock followed by intense, terrifying vindication washed over him. She protected me. That's why she risked herself. She had protected the source of her survival. He was now certain. Her submission was real. Her fear hadn't broken her, it had made her loyal. She was his anchor. The moment their eyes locked, his alpha nature solidified. He felt a terrifying swell of affection, his twisted version of love. Even so, his paranoia flared. He needed to make her loyalty visible, permanent. He knelt, pulling her to her feet, ignoring the guards. After that, he tore a piece of silk from her already torn sleeve. He needed to mark her, to claim her in a way no political maneuver could undo. "You are mine," he grated, his voice raw with possessive triumph. Because of that conviction he found his canines extending. Instead of a gentle claim, he bit down hard on the delicate curve of her shoulder, a primal territorial mark that tore skin and stained the black silk with crimson. Serena didn't fight or scream, she just gasped, the pain tightening her frame into a knot of endurance. As the bond pulsed with the fresh blood, Drakkar rose, leaving her a whimpering mess but now marked. The internal question was finally answered and replaced. She's proven she's real. Now how far will her loyalty go? Chapter 12, The Isolation Protocol. Drakkar dealt with the aftermath of the attack swiftly, brutally, and publicly. Come morning he purged the citadel. More importantly, the purge focused on anyone who had dared to look at Serena with lust, envy, or calculation, anyone who saw her as a tool or a weakness. He executed 2 minor betas and exiled a powerful, gossiping human courtier. As a result, the citadel atmosphere tightened like a drum's skin. Everyone understood, the Omega was the king's true weakness and therefore her protection was paramount. Drakkar restricted Serena's movements severely. Instead of being confined to her suite, she was now confined almost entirely to the king's personal wing, a fortress within a fortress. No more court appearances, no more guarded walks in the gardens. Just like that, the 2-person cage was sealed. He sat on his obsidian throne, watching her as she arranged the sparse items in her new, smaller chamber. Still he felt oddly secure. The public mark on her shoulder was a physical barrier, and the absolute elimination of every threat to her felt like the final step in securing his own soul. "You are safe here," he told her, his voice rough. "No one will touch you, no one will use you. You belong only to me." Serena looked up, her hand instinctively touching the raw bite mark on her shoulder. That's why she was here, she knew. His ultimate obsession. She felt it, clear as day. The prison had shrunk, cutting off any chance of external escape or communication. This heightened security is an obstacle, she calculated silently, but it also brings me closer to the source of the poison. Drakkar misread her steady gaze as quiet gratitude. After that, he left her alone for the first time since the attack. He needed to focus on the war now that his personal territory was secure. He walked down the corridor, feeling the odd quiet peace that her presence always brought. He felt secure, oddly calm and completely anchored. He was oblivious. Deep down he knew the truth. Serena's isolation was not her final defeat, but the strategic necessity for the beginning of her true plan. The closer the cage, the closer the weapon. The game was about to shift into a desperate, silent war of nerves. Chapter 13, The Unwitting Access. Drakkar felt a deceptive calm settle over him, the kind that follows a decisive military victory. Because of that security, he decided to reward Serena's absolute obedience and stillness. He believed she was fully aligned with his survival, and her proximity was strangely soothing. Instead of confining her to silent idleness, he gave her a task, organizing the personal effects in his inner sanctum, a small, highly guarded study where he kept old journals and private trophies. "These must be catalogued," Drakkar instructed, placing a heavy leather-bound ledger on the table. After that he watched her carefully. Still there was no fear, only that cold, quiet diligence. She is finally understanding that service is survival. Serena began her work, her movements precise. Drakkar observed her from his throne, seeing her hands brush over the obsidian dagger he used as a paperweight, its blade sharp enough to take a life instantly. Not only that, her eyes paused for a fraction of a second too long on a small sealed wooden box hidden among his maps. Drakkar didn't notice the pause. He was too busy admiring the quiet rhythm of her focus. The wooden box was, in fact, the repository for a potent, fast-acting venom, a rare political tool he kept near but rarely used. Serena's ancestral knowledge had identified the scent on the wood before she even touched it. In that moment her cold, internal resolve flared. Her opportunity was here. As the wind shifted outside the tower window, Drakkar felt a peculiar satisfaction watching her. That's why he felt powerful. He could finally trust someone in his sanctum. Without another word, he left her to her task. Let her work. Let her feel the weight of my trust. Serena worked for hours. Meanwhile, Dracker was distracted by council matters. By the time he returned, the ledger was neatly organized and the box was sealed, apparently untouched. Little did he know, Serena had successfully retrieved a small single dose of the venom, hiding it in a hollowed-out piece of the ashwood comb she carried, a final, secret weapon she'd smuggled in during her capture. The act solidified her commitment. The tool was acquired. The path to vengeance was clear. Chapter 14. The Terrifying Intimacy. The evening found Dracker in a state of dangerous vulnerability. The political maneuvers of the day had left him heavy with the weight of his crown, a burden he never shared. But then, he looked at Serena sitting quietly, his protective mark visible on her shoulder, and the dam of his reserve cracked. He dismissed the guards. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of aged wine, forcing one into Serena's hands. As the silence roared, he started to speak, not to a subordinate, but to a silent, essential confidant. They want the weakness, Dracker muttered, swirling the crimson wine. They always look for weakness. That's why I kill before they can find it. But, he stopped, looking at her, his alpha glow dimmed by genuine fatigue. But it is tiring, Omega. Truly tiring. He proceeded to reveal a painful memory, the full, desperate extent of Lyra's betrayal, the fear that still clung to him like a shroud, the reason for his paranoia of betrayal. He showed her the piece of obsidian from Chapter 2. I thought her love was real. It wasn't. It was the deepest lie of all. Because of that, I know all softness is deceit. Serena listened, her breathing shallow. Even so, she managed to raise her hand and place it gently on his forearm. Her touch was calculated, but felt warm and real against his cold skin. My king, she whispered, her voice husky, you are never weak. Your protection is absolute. That is not a weakness. The words, so carefully manufactured to align with his philosophy, hit Dracker with devastating force. Just like that, he felt a terrifying swell of affection. A raw, confusing mixture of possessive lust and genuine emotional connection. She understands me, he thought, not just my power but my pain. The space between them burned with this new, terrifying intimacy. The emotional blur was at its peak. Dracker believed he was forging a unique, powerful connection. She didn't know what scared her more, the cold reality of his genuine feeling or the fact that she was effectively gathering the intelligence needed to destroy him. With a single glance, she mapped the tremor in his hand, noting how deeply this vulnerability could be exploited. He sets a date for a major public appearance, planning to officially elevate her status. This was the perfect time, she decided, for a public display of her loyalty. Chapter 15. The Unbreakable Resolve. It was the dead of night. Dracker woke suddenly, his alpha senses prickling. As her wolf stirred, a metaphorical sense of her true fierce nature breaking through, he smelled it, a fleeting strange scent from Serena's adjoining room. It wasn't fear or sadness or desire. It was a sharp, suppressed scent of ash and bitter determination. He heard the faint sound of suppressed tears, but the scent was all wrong. He entered her room. Serena was facing the wall, her shoulders shaking. Instead of rushing to comfort her with dominance, Dracker hesitated, confused by the scent. He knelt beside her, pulling her gently but firmly into his arms. What is it, Omega? He murmured, inhaling the conflicting sense of trauma and steely resolve. He misinterpreted the suppressed determination as her struggling against the trauma he inflicted, believing she was mourning her lost life. That's why he felt a strange, paternal sense of tragic responsibility. Because of that misinterpreted grief, he did something unprecedented. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, roughly carved wooden bird. This, he said, holding it out, is from your old lands. A small trophy I kept from the siege. Take it. Remember where you came from and remember who saves you now. The bird was a small, insignificant artifact of the conquered province. But to Serena, it was a piece of her old home, the sight of which was a brutal, stark reminder of her family's murder and the ash she carried in her heart. Just like that, everything changed. The scent of determination intensified, and the last vestiges of her emotional vulnerability were burned away by the shock of the artifact. He kept this as a trophy from their home. She felt it, clear as day, the moment of no return. Her resolve hardened into cold iron. The time for tears was over. The date for the assassination, the public elevation he planned, was the perfect, inescapable opportunity. Dracker felt a deep sense of closure, believing he had bridged their gap with this strange, intimate gift. He kissed the mark on her shoulder. But then he left, content in his delusion. With his scent in the air, Serina's eyes opened, clear, dry, and cold. The piece of venom-laced ashwood comb was hidden, and the date was set. The king was anticipating his triumph of possession. Serina was anticipating her final vengeance. The trap was ready. Chapter 16. The Imperfect Scent. It was the night before the scheduled public appearance. The night Dracker planned to officially elevate Serina, believing he was celebrating his ultimate victory of possession. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the alpha's intense desire, Dracker was consumed by the physical intimacy, the culmination of his possessive obsession. They were tangled in the heavy furs on his bed. The moment their eyes locked in the shadows, Dracker's senses were at their peak. He was drowning in the mixture of their scents, feeling the absolute power of his claim. But then it happened. In a split-second flicker, a critical slip in Serina's carefully maintained facade. The scent of absolute fear, her only protection, vanished. Instead, it was replaced by a quick, sharp scent of cold rage and focused purpose. It was raw, volatile, and quickly suppressed, but it was there. It smelled like the cold, pure intent of a predator, not the passive fear of prey. Dracker froze. His alpha senses screamed betrayal. Just like that, everything changed. The comfortable weight of his obsession instantly transformed back into the burning poison of his paranoia. Is this possession real, or is she just another lie? He pulled back, icy cold, the warmth draining from the room. After that, he stared down at her, the golden intensity in his eyes hardening to the color of flint. Serina's eyes, suddenly wide with panic, reflected the realization of her error. The air thickened with the unspoken accusation. "You smell of purpose, Omega." Dracker's voice was low, terrifyingly devoid of emotion. "Purpose is a weapon." "Who gave you a weapon?" Serina stammered, scrambling to rebuild her fear scent, but the deception was already exposed. Not only that, the raw, primal scent of purpose confirmed his deepest fears. She was playing him. He felt an agonizing pain of betrayal, far worse than Lyra's, because his feelings for Serina were terrifyingly genuine. He didn't need a confession. So he simply got up, leaving her shivering beneath the heavy furs. Without another word, he grabbed the nearest communicator. He canceled the public appearance, which meant the Citadel was instantly plunged into lockdown. The game was over. Now only the judgment remains. Chapter 17. The Silent Interrogation. The cold fury that consumed Dracker was absolute. Come morning, he subjected Serina to a brutal, silent interrogation in the small mirrored surveillance room from Act 3. Instead of questions, he used psychological pressure, denying her food, water, and rest, sitting across from her and simply watching. Dracker's goal was simple: to break the true Serina, not the Omega mask. He wanted to hear the full extent of the lie, to confirm the poison of his own mistaken trust. Serina held, however. No matter how hard she tried, she maintained the crumbling facade, refusing to crack, the scent of fear now ragged and desperate, but still clinging on. Meanwhile, Dracker's guards, following his frantic orders, scoured the personal wing. Moments later, Kale returned with a small, sealed bag. Inside, the venom-laced ashwood comb. Dracker looked at the object. As the truth unraveled, his breathing hitched. It wasn't the dagger or the poison that broke him. It was the ashwood bird he had given her in Act 5. The final proof of her malice was hidden in the artifact of her sorrow. The cost of vengeance for Serina was the failure of her plan. For Dracker, it was the obliteration of his fragile hope. He slammed the comb onto the table. After that, he pointed at the comb and then at the mark on Serina's shoulder. "A gift of trust," he rasped, his voice thick with devastated betrayal. used to hide the poison. Every touch, every whisper, every shiver, a lie. Serina's composure finally cracked. Between them something cracked. It was her will. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of defeat, not submission. But then she slowly lifted her gaze to meet his, and for the first time, Drakkar saw the true hatred she carried, raw and magnificent. He felt a deep, chilling despair. That's why she was here, to murder him. He had not captured an Omega. He had sheltered an assassin. Chapter 18. The Crucible of Hate. Drakkar was beyond rage. He was utterly broken by the confirmation of his paranoia. So he decided he would not kill her. He would crush the spirit that held that hatred. He dragged Serina, weakened and defeated, from the interrogation room. Instead of taking her to the dungeon, he took her to the courtyard where Kale was punishing a guard who had failed to check the rafters during the assassination attempt, the one that occurred in Chapter 11. Drakkar forced Serina to watch the brutal display. He didn't know what scared her more, the punishment itself or the cold, focused cruelty in Drakkar's eyes. Drakkar was trying to show her the inescapable price of failure and the depth of his power. Even so, as the guard screamed, something happened that Drakkar hadn't anticipated. Serina's control snapped. Her wolf pressed forward, the metaphor of her indomitable will asserting itself. She didn't look at the screaming guard, she looked at Drakkar. Her eyes, stripped of the Omega's fear, blazed with pure, focused hatred. The scent of ash and vengeance, no longer suppressed, flooded the air. She hates me. She truly hates me. Drakkar felt a strange, primal mixture of fury and exhilarating respect for her unbroken will. In the quiet that followed the punishment, Drakkar seized her jaw. "Look at me, assassin," he commanded, his voice shaking. "You thought you broke me with your lie. But your hatred is my ultimate prize." He shoved her away. As the sky darkened, he gave the final order, "Take her to the deep dungeon. No light. No food. No guards. I will not kill you, Serina. I will break the hatred itself." He left her in the dark, cold cell, believing she was completely defeated, vulnerable, and helpless. Just like that, Serina reached her lowest point, her plan destroyed, her weapon gone, and her life in the hands of the man she hated. Her voice trembled as she whispered the name of her murdered brother, the final, stark reminder that the game wasn't over. Her vengeance would find another way. Chapter 19. The Unexpected Silence. Drakkar hadn't intended to return so soon. Instead, he had planned to let the crushing isolation of the deep dungeon, no light, no sound, no alpha scent, break Serina's mind over weeks. But then, the memory of her blazing hatred wouldn't let him rest. He needed to confirm that the flame was extinguished. He descended into the lowest levels of the citadel, where the air was cold and damp, smelling of ancient stone and confinement. He found her cell, a heavy iron gate sealed by a single archaic latch. Without warning, he slid the door open, flooding the small space with the stark light of his lantern. He expected weeping, pleading, or the frantic, desperate scramble of a prisoner. As the echo faded, Drakkar stopped dead. Serina was sitting against the back wall, wrapped in the thin, filthy shift she was captured in. She wasn't weeping. She wasn't begging. Not only that, her body was still, her breathing controlled, and her eyes, though exhausted, were wide open. There was no scent of fear left, only the deep, bitter scent of ash and cold resolve, far stronger than before. She is not broken, he realized with a terrifying shock. In fact, she looked calmer than she had in his own luxurious suite. "Why are you so quiet, Omega?" Drakkar's voice was a low threat. "Where is your fear? Where are your tears?" Serina slowly raised her head. With a single glance that lacked all former submission, she met his gaze, and held it. Her eyes were empty of terror, only filled with a chilling, focused calm that terrified him more than her hatred had. That's why he felt a sharp, internal sting of defeat. She is willing to die, he realized. She is willing to die to win. Because of that frightening realization, Drakkar knew the time for slow, psychological torture was over. He had to extinguish that flame of defiance now. Just like that, he slammed the door shut and called for Kale. "Bring her," he commanded, his voice tight with barely contained fury. Bring her back to my chamber. I will conduct the final break myself. Chapter 20. The Trap Unsprung. Drakkar forced Serena back into the very chambers where their deadly game of intimacy began. Instead of forcing her onto the bed, he forced her into a chair, his chair, and stood over her, his alpha presence a suffocating weight. At the same time he picked up the piece of obsidian, the dark mirror of his past trauma. Tell me the full truth of your planning, Drakkar demanded, his voice low and guttural. Tell me how long you plotted to kill me, and I might grant you a quick end. Serena, thin and weak from her time in the dungeon, remained silent for a long agonizing moment. But then she smiled, a tiny, cold, cruel curve of her lips that carried no warmth, only triumph. You speak of weakness, my king, she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady despite its rasp. You spoke of Lyra's weakness. But Lyra only aimed for your heart. As her wolf pressed forward, the true alpha in Serena emerged. She leaned forward, the sudden movement aggressive and purposeful. I aimed for your reputation. Drakkar froze. What is she talking about? More importantly, the scent of cold rage was now overwhelming. The Northern Council, Serena continued, her voice gaining strength. You killed my family for opposing you. But I sent a message before capture, a single code word. It confirmed the location of the documents your beta, Elric, had been trying to move. Lies? Drakkar hissed, grabbing her arm. No, Serena countered, the word ringing with devastating finality. Your northern allies now know that your claim to the throne relies on a forged treaty. They know the truth because I sent the signal before you took me. Drakkar staggered back, the obsidian piece falling from his numb fingers. The air thickened with the sudden, crushing reality of a political disaster far greater than any assassination attempt. That's why she was so quiet. She had already won the true war. He realized his possessive obsession had blinded him to the external threat. He had spent months playing a psychological game while his kingdom was being undermined. You little demon. Drakkar roared, consumed by betrayed fury, his hands shaking. Just like that, the true, intelligent, vengeful Serena had delivered the killing blow to his throne, forcing him to deal with the political fallout over her immediate death. Chapter 21. The True Alpha Unveiled. Rage, betrayal, and political ruin hammered Drakkar's mind. As the tension broke, he threw a heavy vase across the room, the shattering sound a pathetic mirror of his own breaking control. Instead of defending herself, Serena watched him with an intense, triumphant focus. You are ruined, she stated, her voice almost calm. I succeeded. My family is avenged. Drakkar lunged, not to kill but to reclaim control, to crush her defiance physically now that he had lost the mental war. Without warning he seized her, lifting her clear off the floor. His alpha glow was frantic, violent. But Serena was ready. She felt it, clear as day. This was her one and only chance. In the span of a breath, she moved with lethal, focused speed. She used her body weight and a movement she'd practiced for months. She headbutted Drakkar hard beneath his jaw, a stunning, unexpected blow. Not only that, her small, bloodied hand, still weak but purposeful, plunged into his heavy fur sleeve. She had hidden one final, tiny piece of sharpened metal. A broken shard from the candelabra that hit her under the permanent bite mark she never washed. She plunged the shard into his thigh, striking deep into the muscle, a non-lethal but debilitating wound that targeted the large nerve cluster. A shocking, searing pain erupted through Drakkar. That's why his alpha strength buckled. He let out a primal, wounded growl, a sound of agony, betrayal, and absolute disbelief. He stumbled, releasing Serena. The moment their eyes locked, Serena didn't look like an Omega, she looked like a triumphant warrior. The true alpha in her, her unbreakable will, was unveiled. Drakkar realized with a final devastating clarity, I have never possessed her. Not for a second. He fell to one knee, gripping his throbbing thigh, the poison of her revelation and the pain of the wound paralyzing him. Just like that, everything changed. The hunter was now the prey, injured and exposed. Serena, triumphant but utterly spent, grabbed a heavy brass candle holder. The climax was upon them. Chapter 22. The Climax. Agony, betrayal, and a furious refusal to die roared through Drakkar. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the Alpha's final surge, he struggled to rise, his injured leg throbbing. Instead of fleeing the room, which was the logical move for Serena, she stood her ground, the heavy brass candle holder raised, her eyes blazing with the same magnificent hatred he'd witnessed in the courtyard. He knew he could still crush her. His Alpha strength was vast. But then his obsession resurfaced, a final, fatal flaw. He couldn't kill her. He couldn't destroy the one thing that had challenged and anchored his chaotic world. He had to capture her, to force her to watch her political victory crumble, to finally break the hatred itself. Drop it, Omega. Drakkar grated, pushing himself up onto his one good knee. The political damage is done. Now you submit. Serena took a step back, maintaining distance, her small chest heaving. In that moment, her small, bloodied hand, the one that had held the poison, tightened around the brass. Never, she whispered, the word carrying the weight of all the conquered territories. You killed my family. You took my home. That's why I will take your life and your throne. Drakkar lunged, abandoning all strategy, fueled purely by a possessive, wounded need to overpower her. As the air thickened, their bodies collided in a brutal, desperate tangle of strength versus skill. Serena ducked beneath his wild swing, the candle holder clanging uselessly against his armored shoulder. Not only that, she used the momentum to drive her sharp elbow into his floating ribs, a small blow that intensified his existing pain. He grabbed her, his scarred hands tightening around her small waist, intending to lift her and crush her defiance. But then the poison and the stab wound and his leg delivered the final, crippling blow. His strength failed him, a terrifying first. Serena used the lapse. Without warning, she wrenched free, leaving the mark of his claim, the bite wound raw and exposed. She swung the heavy candle holder in a clean, forceful arc, not at his head, but directly at his kneecap. A blinding white explosion of pain erupted. Just like that, Drakkar's leg shattered, and he went down with a guttural, wounded roar that shook the heavy timbers of the chamber. He hit the stone floor, his entire world tilting into agony. He looked up at Serena, standing over him, triumphant, bloody, and glorious in her vengeance. His last conscious thought was the brutal answer to his lifelong question. The possession was the lie. Only the hatred was real. His vision blurred, swallowed by darkness. Chapter 23. The Aftermath of Vengeance. The deafening alarms of the citadel finally blared, the noise sounding distant and pathetic against the silence of Drakkar's defeat. Meanwhile, Serena stood over the fallen king, her body trembling not with fear, but with adrenaline and pure, debilitating exhaustion. Drakkar's breathing was shallow, his alpha strength broken, his gold eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. After that, Serena slowly dropped the brass candle holder. It landed with a dull, heavy thud. As the wind shifted through the open balcony, it carried the scent of blood, ash, and a profound, weary resolution. She knelt, ignoring the excruciating pain in her own starved body. With his scent in the air, she placed one small, steady hand on Drakkar's motionless chest. She felt the weak, fading rhythm of his heartbeat. He had been a monster, a captor, and the obsession that nearly ruined her. He was also the only being she had allowed herself to be truly vulnerable with, even if that vulnerability was a weapon. The job was done. Her family was avenged. That's why she felt an emptiness that transcended victory. The cost of vengeance was the absence of the woman she used to be. Footsteps pounded outside. Kale and the King's Guard were seconds away. In the span of a breath, Serena snatched the obsidian dagger, the paperweight from Chapter 13, from the table, a final trophy. She moved to the heavy balcony window. She felt it, clear as day, a new scent entering the room, panic, rage, and a terrifying wounded loyalty. Without another word, Serena threw a heavy velvet curtain over the bloodied king, obscuring his immediate state from view. She was gone the moment Kale burst through the doors. The great, paranoid Alpha King was defeated, and the Omega assassin had vanished, leaving behind nothing but chaos and a shattered throne. Chapter 24, Epilogue, The Empty Throne. 1 year later. The Citadel was plunged into civil war. Drakkar was either dead or permanently crippled. The truth kept a terrifying secret by his inner circle, who now fought fiercely for the empty throne. The political vacuum Serena had engineered was a violent, raging success. Meanwhile, far to the south, near the quiet coast of a neutral territory, a small, scarred woman known only as Lena worked as a healer among a community of displaced Omegas. She was respected, quiet, and kept to herself. She was not Serena, the terrified Omega. She was not Lena, the warrior. She was only a survivor, marked by the scars on her shoulder and the knowledge of the king she had felled. But then, sometimes when the wind shifted, she would catch the phantom scent of wood smoke and metallic authority, Drakkar's scent, and her heart would pound a single, heavy beat. As the bond pulsed with that phantom memory, she would touch the cool, smooth obsidian dagger she kept hidden, her only remaining trophy. Despite that victory, she was not free. She was an anchorless queen who traded one terrifying prison for a solitary, quiet cage. The scent of ash was a faint, constant reminder that her life had been defined by vengeance. The only question left was, could she ever build something new on the ashes of her old life, or would the ghost of the paranoid Alpha King haunt her freedom forever?